Hello again, and welcome back to the Racing Writers Podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Crandall. I would say this is a bit of a special episode. Today marks the 25th anniversary of the passing of Davey Allison, and as many of us think back on Davey's life and career today, and certainly this week, I wanted to talk to someone who knew him best, someone that can offer some insight into who Davey Allison was, not just as a race car driver, but a person. That would be his wife, who became a widow at just 28 years old, Liz Allison. So I want to get right into this episode today as we, again, remember Davey, and I'll be back afterwards with some housekeeping notes pertaining to the podcast in general. So here is Liz Allison on the Racing Writers Podcast. So you mentioned you were on vacation. I want to throw as much as possible that I can at you, and I appreciate you, really appreciate you taking the time. Of course, the reason I wanted to talk is because as we record this, we're only a few days away from, of course, it's been 25 years since Davey passed. I wanted to start kind of on a down note in that sense of, what is this time of the year like for you, Liz, and the family when this anniversary rolls around every July?
You know, it's weird, Kelly, because, the heart doesn't know time and grief doesn't know time. And so it's so easy to kind of fall into that timeline of 25 years ago, a few days before the accident, and then it's 24 hours before the accident, and that's the day of the accident, and it's so easy just to fall into that place, and it's hard because we have to all kind of rally around each other. Each one of us handle it differently, as everybody does with grief. It's a very individualized thing. And we just kind of rally around, and whatever everybody needs, that's what we do, and it's different from year to year too. It's kind of weird because it's like each year one of the family will kind of come to the forefront to kind of pull everybody else through it. Then the next year it seems like somebody else wears that cap, and so it definitely, it's hard to believe that it's been 25 years. And what's even more hard to believe is that it's been 25 years since he was here with us, and that, I think that's that really weird, almost sensation of it's been 25 years since he was sitting in the room with us, but then there's other times where I feel like he never existed because it's been so long. So it's a really strange dynamic.
I want to go back to the beginning, if you don't mind. I read a fantastic piece from Marty Smith when he wrote it for ESPN back in 2015, I believe, and I went back to reread it, and he wrote of kind of the first time that you and Davey met. I believe it was in the late 80s, if I'm remembering correctly. And as Marty writes it, you weren't necessarily into racing, didn't really maybe know much about it. So what kind of clicked in a sense of drawing you two together?
I guess it was just fate. Because it is so. We were the most unlikely candidates to come together, and it was at Somerville Speedway in South Carolina, and it was just a balmy, hot, low country night, and I was not really thrilled about being there to start with. I was living in Charleston, and I had a friend that was dating one of the Powell boys, and the Powells owned Somerville Speedway, and so she had been asking me to go to the racetrack, and I just had just been pulling back, and no, I don't think I want to go. Why do I want to go to this racetrack? And then she called and said, hey, there's the Tiny Lund Memorial. And she said there'll be some NASCAR guys there, and it'll be fun. It'll be something different. You should come and go with me. So I threw on a pair of shorts, and I remember a little blue pair of shorts and this little yellow tank top that I can't believe I even walked out of the door with it on. I wouldn't let my girls out of the door with it on. And I think about that now, and I just went to the racetrack, just as a young girl hanging out with her girlfriends, just hanging out at the racetrack. And so what's really interesting about that to me all these years later is that Wanda Lund and I became friends after Davey passed away, and so it was really interesting that he and I met at the Tiny Lund Memorial. But that's how we met. We met that night at Somerville Speedway, and it was just a last minute thing for me, and just threw some shorts on and went out there, and we met.
It's kind of an open-ended question, Liz, but what was it like, what was life like with Davey? Not just the race car driver, but him as a father and a husband. It wasn't much time, unfortunately, for you two in terms of being married, but what was that time like? Because every time I've heard you talk or read things, it sounds like you just always have a smile kind of reflecting on it.
Yeah, I mean, it was a happy time. We were young and we were in love, and we had a growing family and wanted more kids, and it was just, not perfect. Nobody's perfect. It was definitely a struggle at times to deal with there were times when I felt like I competed with racing almost, and the race car, that he was so passionate about what he did, and it sounds funny to say I was jealous of the race car, but there were times, early on where it was like, I want your attention, and racing gets it, and but that's what made him who he was, and especially now looking back, I so can just respect that passion and that dedication that he had, and at the time being young, I didn't always understand it, because I felt like it was so overkill. But again, looking back, I think, for someone to live that lifestyle, and it is a lifestyle. It's a job, it's a career, but it's also a lifestyle. You live it. And, I realize looking back that, you have to look at it that way, or you can't survive the crazy of it all. But we had a lot of fun, and Davey was just a fun guy to be around. He was funny. He told really stupid jokes, but he thought they were funny, and everybody would laugh because it was Davey. He was just lighthearted, but yet at the same time very passionate, driven, and had a temper. And that's what for those on his race team, knew. He punched his fist into the side of the trailer and broke his wrist, and he loved to race, and he wanted to win every time he was on the racetrack, and he just was he was just fun to be around. He had a lot of energy, was a kind person, very considerate, and he really just made you want to be a better person. And he was so much fun to be around, he made you want to be around him.
To that point, it's funny, one of the things I wanted to ask was, what was his sense of humor like? I read... The more I learn about him and the more I read, I'm always finding something fascinating. And I came across something that said in 1991 at Dover, during the middle of the race, he came over the radio and was asking for Krispy Kreme donuts. What was that sense of humor like?
He was just really goofy, and again, you just kind of went along with it because Davey was just goofy, so you just never knew what was going to come out of his mouth. And it was such a funny balance, because a lot of people that are goofy are just goofy, right? Like across the board. But he was like goofy and really driven and very gifted too, which was an odd combination. But like the NASCAR officials, Davey drove them nuts. He was the kind that was always goosing them, and everybody'd be all serious, and then he would do something to just completely break the ice in the room. And it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't always necessarily funny. It was just so goofy and coming from left field that you just, you would just take it, but he goofy and very spontaneous, and you just never really knew where it was coming from. You just knew it was Davey.
You also mentioned, of course, that he was very competitive, and I've read a lot about how specifically when it came to wanting to be better than Bobby, wanting to best his dad, what do you think was the driving force behind him being so competitive and wanting to be, not just a good race car driver, but the best of anybody? He wanted to be, again, he just wanted to be the best race car driver out there.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, because he wanted to beat the best to be the best. And so for him, beating Bobby meant that he was better than the best. And so he knew in his mind that his dad, there was no better race car driver. And he watched him, for growing up, he always kept his eye on his dad. And Davey always knew he wanted to do what his dad did, but he wanted to do it better. And that was probably the biggest drive. The other thing is that Bobby made Davey work hard. And it wasn't always pretty. You know, I mean, there were times when in the race shop, if Davey didn't do something right, then you tear it down and you start over. You know, you don't start where you are and make it right. You start from the beginning and you do it right from the beginning all the way through. And, you know, that can be tough, you know, on kids. And so understanding that it wasn't easy for him and Bobby never handed anything to him, he had a little edge to him. But Bobby did it because he knew that he had to train and teach Davey that way, or he would never appreciate it, he would never respect it, and he would never learn from the ground up, and he wouldn't learn right. He wouldn't learn the right way to do it. And so there was a little edge there, and I think that was a driving force, but more importantly, he wanted to beat the best.
Is there a misconception, Liz, that like most drivers who have a race car driver dad, that Davey had things handed to him?
Oh boy, he did not have anything handed to him. I mean, if anything, you know, I could look back as a mom and go, man, could you have handed him a little something? You know, I mean, yeah, it was he never had anything handed to him. And man, the Bob Harmons of the world and out at the fairgrounds in Nashville, I mean, those promoters could tell you what it was like for Davey coming along in the days of the Peach Fuzz gang. And man, there was that was, you couldn't be any further from the truth than that. And again, that was that edge. And maybe at times Davey even felt like maybe he should be given a little more than what he was, or a little more assistance than what he was. But I mean, the other thing is too, Bobby was gone all the time. He was racing all the time. So he left, you know, Davey, you know, his racing in the care of some of the guys at the shop, Pop Allison, Grandpa Allison, who kind of led the Peach Fuzz gang around. And, so, I mean, Bobby wasn't there a lot too, so a lot of his leadership with Davey was done from afar, and it was filtered through someone else. So it was an interesting dynamic, but never had anything handed to him.
What did winning races mean to him? You know, 19 wins in his Cup career, the Daytona 500 including. What did winning mean to him? What was he like when he won races?
Oh, I mean, everything. Winning was everything to him. And it's interesting, and I being in the business as long as I've been in the business, and I would love to get into the head of some of the other drivers and their winning, because I think there's a part of Davey that, like, he didn't know how good he was. You know, he knew that he enjoyed doing what he did, and he knew he wanted to do it more than anything else, and he knew he was good. But did he know he was great and that he was gifted? I don't know. I don't know that, you know, and I don't know that drivers know that. I mean, do they go around, you know, thinking, man, you know, I'm it, you know, I've got everything that makes me the best, or an awesome race car driver. And so for Davey, when he won, it was almost like there was this little insecure spot, you know, and he'd win, and then for a moment that little spot would be filled, you know, and it was like, okay, you know, and it pushed him a little harder, and the more he won, the more he wanted to win.
Of course, at the time, no one could imagine that Richmond in 1993 would be his last Cup Series win. Do you remember anything about that victory, or anything maybe about that weekend, anything that stands out?
You know, it's funny, 1993 is a blur for me, and I think that it's just the way grief is. There's so few things that I remember about 1993, probably because I was still trying to get over 1992, which was the year from hell.
Right.
But you know, outside of that, I don't. It's just so weird. Like, even Daytona in July, which was so close to us losing Davey, like, there's just little spurts of memory that come in, but I really have a lot of just darkness in that year, just a lot of memory lapse, I guess. It's kind of weird how grief does that.
It's weird. I really don't like to play the what if game, when it comes to drivers or their careers, but it seems like, of course, when we lose somebody like Davey or Alan Kowicki, a lot of people like to sit and be like, man, what if this hadn't happened, how the sport would have been, what their careers would have been like. Did Davey ever, or you and Davey ever think of, kind of how he envisioned his career playing out, maybe what he saw for himself, and of course what he wanted to accomplish, which naturally I'm assuming was a championship. Did he ever have any of those thoughts of kind of how he saw his career going?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he wanted to win championships over and over again. I mean, race car drivers don't go out there to do anything different, right? They go out there to win races, as many races as they can. And if they don't run good, if they're not winning, they're irritable, they're awful to be around. And, they want championships, and they want multiple championships, and they want to be the best. And that's, Davey wanted all of that. He wanted all of that. And I think that, again, kind of that, knowing that he was good, did he know he was great? I mean, he just knew that he was willing to do whatever he needed to do to make that happen. And he would work as hard as it would take to make it happen and do whatever he needed to do to play a part in that.
Going back to something you had said earlier about how competitive he was and he had a temper, what was was there a funny moment or maybe a memorable moment of how crazy he got over something? You mentioned he broke his wrist hitting the hall, or any more of those type stories?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, I can think of a few people that would have been at the receiving end of that from time to time. And so, one of the funniest things to me, I think, were he and Dale Sr. I mean, it was the same mindset with Dale Sr. as it was with his dad. Like, if he could beat Dale, then he was beating the best. And Dale and Davey had a great relationship. And I think a very special bond, as we still do, the Allisons and the Earnhardts do. And I would just love their family, and our family has a lot of just deep ties and connections. And it started way back when. But I think for Davey, man, he could get as mad at Dale as anybody, but it's because he wanted to beat him all the time. I think that's probably the funniest, that kind of in between of being mad at Dale, but also like Davey couldn't not like Dale. He probably it would have been easier for him to not like him, but he just couldn't. And so that was the challenge for him, was with Dale all the time. But, Jeff Bodine, I mean, certainly I remember at Daytona one year, he and Jeff, just going at it. And there were several drivers that he just for whatever reason, just rubbed him a little differently. And so those drivers would be challenges, or would be a challenge for him. But I can't think of anything really off the cuff other than the stupid stuff that he did when he was mad, and that's like breaking his wrist. So yeah.
After his passing, you stayed in the sport, and you've mentioned, for instance, Michigan. My goodness, it really is a Monday morning. Chicagoland yesterday wasn't on your schedule. You've become an author. You've worked in radio and television. Was it hard to stay in the sport after he passed, or natural for you at that point?
Well, I didn't come back in the sport until 1998, so I took 5 years away from the sport. And that was a time of just... That was just a blur. The kids were 1 and 3. I was 28 when Davey passed away. I made a lot of mistakes early on, right after he passed away, and I just realized I really just needed to huddle down with my kids and just really, we were in survival mode. And so at the time, early on I didn't work, and just tried to surround myself with family and just clean up some stuff that we were in, move out of Hueytown. I knew that was something I needed to do, move closer to family, be around my mom and just family, cousins and friends. And so there was just a lot of that. So when I came back in 1998, I came back because Bill France Jr., he was just a dear friend of mine, and he in that 5 years that I was away, I mean, he never... there hardly went a week or two where I didn't hear from Bill Jr. Always checking on me and the kids, and what he could do for us, and it was just a special friendship that I had with him. So it was of his urging for me to come back in 1998, and so I did. And he had tried to get me to come to work for NASCAR. Humpy Wheeler tried to get me to come work for Charlotte for the Speedway there, and I was like, I don't want to go to work. I need to be with the kids. And I really just didn't know what I wanted to do. I just was just pretty lost. And so anyway, so I did go back in 1998. And then I started just little by little, started doing some work. I met Jim Huber, and he was doing work with Turner at the time, and that kind of opened a few doors. And it was funny because he came and interviewed me, and it was about me coming back to the sport, and what at the time between, and why that was the time. And then after he did a feature on me, he called and said, hey, would you consider coming to work for us? And I thought, well, what in the world would I do, And so it's just funny, one door kind of opened after the other, and then doors close and lead you in another direction. And so it wasn't something that happened right away, but when it did happen, it happened. It felt natural, and it felt, and some doors opened and some closed, and just kind of led me in the path of which I needed to be.
That's wonderful to hear about Bill Jr. I hadn't realized that he kind of made sure to keep an eye on you, in a sense, you and the family.
I mean, there's so much about Bill Jr. that I feel like the people that know him well knew his heart, and knew the kind of man he was away from the racetrack. But, the people that didn't like it, think it would surprise them maybe, but he was a very generous, kind man. Lisa, his daughter, and I have been great friends for many years, and he really kind of sparked that between the two of us. And I have such a soft spot in my heart for Bill France Jr. I owe him a lot as far as just bringing me back into the sport, and always making sure that I was taken care of, and always making sure that I felt welcome, and that was so big for me coming back, because I felt like I didn't have a place, that I wouldn't fit in, and there was a time during that 5 years where I was very angry. It's a part of grief, I was angry at God, at life, at the 28 car for continuing to be the 28 car. I mean, anything, I was mad at it. And so coming back was important that I felt like I belonged somewhere, and that the kids would be welcomed. And Bill France Jr. made sure that happened.
So speaking of, being welcome and being back in the sport, in a sense, you're very active on social media, and you've raised 3 children, you've remarried, but you're still known as Liz Allison. And when it comes to social media and being on there, I'm sure that fans have flocked to you as a connection to Davey. What is social media like in that sense when it comes to your interaction with fans and maybe stories they tell you or things that they send to you?
Oh gosh, it's so amazing. I love it. I love interacting with fans, and I love the stories, and I've just started over the past few months unpacking all these items of Davey's, and they were packed up for a long, long time, off in storage, and just I knew that we would never get rid of those things, and we loved all those things and treasured them, but I also didn't want to see them every day, and just because it was just too much of a reminder, and it's just it just started in storage and stayed in storage for a long time. So I feel like the fans really kind of gave me the courage to start opening those boxes back up and sharing, and it's been so fun in such a weird kind of way. Hard. It's still hard. It's so weird. Like you said, I'm happily married. I adore my husband, who is just a saint, in my opinion, to deal with everything that he's dealt with through the years. We have a beautiful 15-year-old daughter who I just have so much fun being a mom too. And I mean, we have, life goes on, thank God. But it is still hard to sit down and open up that stuff, because as I said before, the heart doesn't know time. And you can love more than one person at a time, and so it's it's amazing how sitting down with those boxes brings it all back. But then as soon as I start posting that stuff, I mean, at Daytona in February this year, it was because I had just started opening up stuff right before Daytona, because it was the off season and I had some time there to get the courage to start diving into some of those boxes. And I mean, it was amazing the number of people, even within the garage area that's in the industry, that said, man, it is so cool seeing that stuff that you're posting. Or I'd be at an event and a fan would come up and say, thank you so much for posting those pictures or those things or whatever. And so now I feel like sharing those things is a continuation of Davey and the gift that he felt fans were such a gift to him, and the fans felt that he was such a gift to them. It was such a giving on both sides. So I feel like this is just a way that hopefully I can take some time and share, and that people appreciate it.
So let's wind down with some happier notes. Davey is going to be inducted into the 2019 NASCAR Hall of Fame class. And first off, we're just 2 months, I think, removed from that announcement, but I imagine it still feels really good.
Oh my gosh. I mean, honestly, if there had been a camera on me, I wouldn't say I'd be embarrassed, because it's such a joyous thing, but I watched it on television like everybody else. And so I literally dropped to my knees and just started bawling. And this sweet Amber Wells from NASCAR, I mean, she called me like right in the moment, and I was sobbing so hard that I could not even talk to her. There was no way to even get the words out of my mouth. It was it is so amazing. I mean, in such a weird kind of way. It's like that final thing for Davey, right? It's like that the race that he didn't win. He still had one more race, and that was it. That was like, oh my gosh. So my big thing is now, I've told the kids, like, we've cried buckets and oceans through the years. I mean, there's been enough tears over 25 years that I don't want us to cry anymore. I want us to celebrate like he would celebrate. If he were alive and he was being inducted into the Hall of Fame, he would want us to celebrate and not to cry anymore. And so I feel like this has been like a real turning point for us with Davey, and it never feels good, because it doesn't matter how long it's been. We lost him and we loved him, and it broke our hearts. But I feel like this is such a happy time to go, okay, you know what, we're turning the corner. Like, there's happy here, and he would be so incredibly happy and honored. And so we're going to stand in that place for him and be happy and honored.
Well, I wanted to ask, maybe without giving away the farm, or I don't want to, jump on anybody's toes and ruin the surprise or anything, but has there been any preparation for the induction ceremony, or how you might be involved, or what might go on?
Oh yeah, that started like right away, and so we've got a few little things up our sleeve that we're really excited about, and so I'm kind of beating by the drum of happy and honor, and not sad, and I don't want to leave the induction ceremony feeling like we've been to a wake, because it's important that he was such a full of life person, and he would want us all to just have a party. He'd want us to have a party, and I don't know that we'll have a party, but we are definitely going to celebrate. And so we're definitely working right now. I've been working with Tom Jensen on what will go in the exhibit, and trying to find some really cool things that people will find interesting, and things that were very personal to him, as well as it's racing items and trophies and stuff, but some personal things too. And I've got some ideas as far as the ceremony is concerned. I know that we'll work closely with NASCAR and the NBC crew, and also the Hall of Fame on that. But we're just super duper excited, and just so incredibly honored and grateful that there's just no words to put to it. It's a big deal.
So I want to put you on the spot. Explain to those who may not have known or seen Davey race, explain in your opinion why he is a Hall of Famer.
I think it's just, if you look at his body of work, that's why he's a Hall of Famer. And I think that, that's been I hate to say argument, but my campaign, I guess, is a better a better way to put it, through the years, and have been for other people as well that have spoken on behalf of Davey, is that if you look at his body of work, there is no question why he's a NASCAR Hall of Famer. And I had somebody that worked for NASCAR many years ago tell me that Davey would never be inducted into the Hall of Fame because he didn't have a championship. And you know what? I kind of felt like Davey with that. I was like, you know what? Just because you said that, I'm going to do everything I can, to make sure that at least I can do my part in helping that not be the case. And there were so many more people with, lots of a bigger voice in mine and use their platform to help with that too. And I feel like the people that are in the rooms voting, they know. So these are all veterans and very well versed NASCAR historians and so on and so forth. So everybody that's nominated deserves to be in the NASCAR Hall of Fame, in my opinion. So there's no question for me. For me, it was just like that maybe the newer fan base that didn't know Davey, didn't understand his body of work. And so I know I've said this to you before when Davey was brought up, that, for me, I know what the body of work is. That to me, the more important thing is about Davey is who he was as a person and the mark that he left personally. And he adored his fans. And there are very few that, and then I'm not saying that's why he should be in the NASCAR Hall of Fame, because that's not enough to get somebody in the NASCAR Hall of Fame. But it sure is nice to pin that on him, along with his body of work, that he did it like nobody else has ever done it, in my opinion. I'm a little partial, obviously, but for all these years later, for people to still have the connection with him, and everywhere I go, everywhere I go racing-wise, every single event that I'm hosting, every appearance that I may go to, any racetrack event, I every time have somebody that comes up and has tears in their eyes and tells me how much Davey meant to them. And that's the mark that he left personally, and then he left the mark professionally by his body of work.
Yeah, we have indeed talked about that. And when it comes to his fans, one of my favorite quotes was when I talked to Lauren Rainier a couple years ago, and he said, everybody liked Bobby or any of these other drivers, but they loved Davey for some reason.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, and I somebody shared a quote with me, and I haven't spoken with Dale Jarrett about this, so I could be speaking out of line here because I haven't heard it from him myself, but it was shared with me that Dale Jarrett said something of the fact that Davey was the Dale Jr. of that time. And I can certainly relate to that. The sport's different. Social media makes everything so different now. So who knows how things, would have been if Davey were racing in this time. But at the time that he was racing, that's the kind of connection that he had. Fans loved him. He loved the fans. He was just a good old country boy that worked hard to make it to the big time. He was a legacy driver, so he was continuing a tradition. He was part of taking us from kind of the old and into the new, into that very exciting time of the sport in the 80s and the 90s. He was a young driver for all practical purposes at that time. Lauren Rainier really fought hard to get Davey in the car at the age that Davey was, because they thought a 26-year-old was too young, which is hilarious now. So there were a lot of things about Davey that made him really special, and it was just during that time he was doing things differently from others, and it made him stand out. And not to mention, he was a dadgum hard charger on the racetrack. He might be a nice guy out of that car, but don't mess with him in that car, because he was going to do what it took to win. And I posted a tweet last night just about the finish at Chicagoland. And, that reminds me of that racing that we saw in the 80s and the 90s, that time frame that so many people want to go back to and say, man, if we could just get back there and race like that. Well, you know what? You got that at Chicagoland. So I don't want to hear complaints from anybody, because that was some awesome racing. But it reminded me of how Davey and how those guys used to race.
Yeah, we were talking about Chicago before I started rolling tape. That was very exciting. And you're right, people do compare it back to the 80s and 90s and the so-called good old days of racing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was a special time. It was a special time to be a part of the sport. And, like so many, I mean, when you're in it, you don't really realize it. When you're in a Hall of Fame career and you're living it, do you know you're a Hall of Famer? I mean, you're just doing what you're doing, and that was part of where we were in the 80s and the 90s. We didn't know how special it was then. It was just fun and exciting, and it was great racing. And now we look back, and and that's kind of like the magic, like that's that magical time in the sport. And we didn't realize how special it was when we were in it.
So 2 more things for you, Liz, as we wrap up. It's another kind of open-ended question, but, for those who are going to listen to this podcast and those who, of course, are going to think of Davey this month, what should they remember or know about Davey Allison?
That he appreciated the fans more than they could have ever loved him. I think that's the biggest thing, is that I don't know why there was such a connection there with him. He felt like he owed them everything. So I guess that's the main thing, is I want fans to know that we're a part of that time and they love Davey, that he loved them more. And the people that didn't know him, I mean, I've jokingly said there's a slew of drivers out there now that could take the Davey Allison lesson of how to be that driver, and how to build your fan base, because he had it down pat. It was the build your fan base 101. Davey could have taught that. I think the other thing is just from a much more personal side, is that when Davey started his career, when I met Davey and early in his Cup career, everything was racing. Everything was the car. I mean, that 3,400 pound race car at the time was the Mistress. I mean, she got it all. She got the attention. She got the time, and as he got into his career several years in, he realized there was more to life than just the race car. And I think, if he could sit here now and tell anybody anything, it would be, hey, racing is awesome and it's wonderful and I loved it, but man, it can't be everything. Your family is number one, and that's where he came to, and that was that shift in him that 91 and 92 really kind of rooted in him, and by the time we lost him, he was it was family first, and then it was racing.
So I want to end this way, Liz. If you would, just tell everybody what you're up to nowadays, and of course where they can follow you on social media if they want to see all of those fun, artifacts that you've been posting for a trip down memory lane.
Well, I am at about half the races every year, which is super fun. I love still being there and being a part of the family, and I have a trackside hospitality company, so I'm there at the racetrack a lot. It's easy to find me if you're out there somewhere and you're at a track where I am. Just send me a tweet. Just tweet me and say, hey, I'm here. And I meet people all the time. I'll run out and meet somebody out in the out in the fan area. A lot of times people are in the garage area down in the pits, and I'll set up a meeting place to go say hi, because I appreciate it so much too, and love to get to meet people. So it's @LizAllison28, and I'm on Facebook too, so pretty easy to find me. So just send me a message, and I love to say hi to people, and I try to post when I'm around. Sometimes a lot of the events are private events, but I'm still out and about over the course of the weekend, and so it's usually easy for me to scoot by and say hello to somebody, and I do it every chance I get.
Well, Liz, I really can't thank you enough. This has been wonderful. I hope it was fun for you, not too sad. And again, I appreciate it so much. So I hope like I saw you earlier this year in Talladega, I hope I get to see you again soon.
Well, thank you, Kelly. It was so much fun. Thank you for having me, and just appreciate you taking the time to have me on your podcast. Best of luck with that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Again, this was awesome, so I appreciate you very much wanting to do it.
All right. Well, take care.
Thanks, Liz.
Bye-bye.
A huge thank you again to Liz for taking some time out of her vacation to chat. She was off doing things with her family. She's always been fun and open to talk to, and I've had the pleasure to get to know her a little bit through social media the last couple years, and I do hope to get to see her again in person. As I said at the top, here are some of your weekly housekeeping notes. If you like what you're hearing, please leave a 5-star rating and review on iTunes or wherever you may be hearing this. You guys are still sending me a message saying that you've heard this wherever, and I've done a horrible job of trying to get this on numerous platforms. So I do appreciate it tremendously, the reviews that you are leaving and everywhere that you're searching for the podcast. And I have some good news. All episodes of the Racing Writers podcast are now on YouTube. So make sure you check out my YouTube page. It's under my name, and you'll find every episode, including today's, on the YouTube page. And make sure you tell your friends in case for some reason they're not subscribed to the podcast on iTunes or wherever. Now you can easily get it on YouTube. Everybody has YouTube, so now the podcast should be available to anybody who wants to listen to it. Thank you again for listening. That's all for this week, and we're going to be back next week with guest Casey Kane on the Racing Writers podcast. Thanks again.